For my book talk presentation, I have chosen When We Were Alone by David Robertson and These Are My Words by Ruby Slipperjack. Both of these books revolve around true stories from individuals who attended residential schools in Canada. When We Were Alone is recommended for students in kindergarten to grade 3, but could easily be used as a teaching resource for higher grades. These Are My Words is written as multiple diary entries geared towards an older audience due to its style and content. David Robertson is an Indigenous graphic novelist and writer from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Of Swampy Cree heritage, Robertson has actually published over 25 books across a variety of genres, including the best-selling graphic novel Sugar Falls. Sugar Falls is similar in theme to When We Were Alone, in the sense that both are based on true stories regarding experiences within a residential school. Julie Flett, who is the illustrator, is an artist of Cree Métis descent from Toronto. She has received many awards, including the 2017 Governor General's Awards for Children's Literature for her work on When We Were Alone, and her book Wild Berries was chosen as the first recipient of the 2014 Aboriginal Literature Award. Published in 2016, When We Were Alone was also a finalist in the TD Canadian Children's Literature Award. When We Were Alone is based on a true story about a young girl who is curious about her grandmother's past. As she asks her grandmother questions about her family, she is told about the realities of life in a residential school. At its core, the story illustrates a very dark time in history, but also provides the reader with a sense of empowerment, strength, and the importance of family. This book is an amazing resource because it facilitates an age-appropriate discussion about the serious impacts residential schools had on family relationships and one's own identity. The part I have chosen to read aloud demonstrates the loss of identity, as well as how Nocum copes with these traumas after the fact. After I helped with the flowers, we went over to the back gate. There were vines covering the gate, and they reached all the way to the ground. When my Kokum returned to fix the latch, I saw that her braid hung almost as low as the vines. It was like she had a tail. "Nocum, why do you wear your hair so long?" I asked. Nocum said, "Well, when I was your age, at home in my community, my friends and I grew our hair long, just like our people have always done. It made us feel strong and proud, but at the school I went to, far away from home, they cut off all of our hair. Our strands of hair mixed together on the ground like blades of dead grass." "Why did you have to wear your hair like that?" I asked. "They didn't like that we were proud," Nocum said. "They wanted us to be like everybody else." But sometimes in the spring, when we were alone and the grass had grown so long and thick in the field, we would pick the blades from the ground. We would braid them into the short hair they had given us, and we would have long hair again, and this made us happy. Now, Nocum said, I always wear my hair very long. A free teacher's guide regarding how to facilitate discussions in the classroom using this picture book is actually provided by Portage in Maine. How to prepare for the class, key concepts in the story, and considerations during and after the reading activity are free to download. For example, as a post-reading activity, an elder could be brought in as a guest speaker to further discuss Indigenous knowledge about certain cultural practices, the Cree language, and contemporary rights and freedoms in Canada. This book allows teachers to address the 5th TQS competency, which is the application of foundational knowledge about FNMI. More specifically, it addresses Part A, Part C, and Part D, which state the legacy of residential schools, how to use the POS as a way to develop an understanding and respect for FNMI cultures, and using resources that reflect the strengths of FNMI. An example of an ELA outcome one might address using this text is in Grade 1. GLO 1.2 states that students will consider the idea of others by listening to experiences and feelings shared by others. We Are Alone actually covers almost every single GLO in social studies except for Grade 3. For example, on this slide I highlighted all of the possible GLOs that this novel would cover. In Grade 1, General Outcome 1.2 states that students will demonstrate an understanding and appreciation of how changes over time have affected their families and influenced how their families and communities are today. So then the applicable SLO from Grade 1 then would be 1.2.1, which states students will appreciate how the languages, traditions, celebrations, and stories of their families, groups, and communities contribute to their sense of identity and belonging. So These Are My Words is part of Dear Canada, and Dear Canada is a series of over 35 historical fiction novels based on past events in Canadian history, written through the diary entries of young girls. This specific text was written by Ruby Slipperjack, who is an Ojibwe writer and painter based out of Northern Ontario. She also attended a residential school, so while this diary is a work of fiction, the events and characters in this book are based on Slipperjack's actual accounts of her time at a residential school. She writes it from the perspective of Violet Pesheens, who is a 12-year-old girl struggling to maintain and uphold her self-identity in a residential school. She turns to her diary as a means to escape the realities of her everyday life, and her biggest fear is forgetting where she came from, such as her language, cultural practices, and family, similarly to the grandma in When We Were Alone. At the end of the text, there is a historical note that ties the diary entry directly to the actualities of residential schools in Canada, and there's also a series of photographs that display living conditions of these institutions. This novel does an incredible job of illustrating the effects of residential schools in Canada in a way that is suitable for younger audiences. This text also covers TQS number 5, but goes into more depth about Canadian history than When We Were Alone. Since it is a more advanced text recommended for young adults, it may only be appropriate for grade 6 and up. An example of a grade 6 SLO this novel would pertain to is 6.1.3, which states that students will analyze how the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms protects collective rights in Canada, such as Aboriginal rights, the linguistic rights of official language minorities, and other. An art, GLO, and activity you could use this text for is under Purpose 4. An outcome from grade 5 and 6 art states that students will express a feeling or a message and will interpret feelings and moods visually. As an activity, students could be asked to select a diary entry and visually represent the overarching mood the entry portrays. So, as a concluding note, I would strongly recommend these books to you as a way to incorporate FNMI knowledge into the classroom. The great thing about these books is that they can be used as cross-curricular texts and don't need to be used exclusively for social studies. As you saw, I included some English outcomes as well as art, but the possibilities are endless.